I guess the lens, the reason why I sort of wanted to go over this, and the lens based on like the stream's title, why I wanted to go over this, was that I saw some people talk about like how they're concerned that Pierre is adopting or co-opting left-wing language. And then I guess the extension of that is that it's bad something to do with the NDP. Like the NDP is not doing enough in terms of using left-wing language, that I guess the conservatives will serve, especially under Pierre, will serve as a foil or siphon off some of the left-wing vote and bring about fascism or something. I hope I'm not like straw manning that position, but you know, I feel like that's sort of how it gets framed. And for an example of that, I'll pull up this thread, anyways. Let's see if I can zoom in a bit so people can read it. Hello, Nick. So I agreed with the first little bit here by Nora. So there's no bad blood between me and Nora. I generally like most of what she has to say. So that is all fun and stuff. But okay, so she goes, okay, in all seriousness, here's the truth. Everything the liberals and the NDP do to stop Poilievre will fail. The only way to confront him is an organized radical left-wing confrontation. I agree with that. The only way to stop fascism, let alone the Conservative Party generally, is through an organized left-wing that directly confronts them. So I agree on that front. So far, good. And then we get, for every piece of shit right-wing thing being said by Poilievre, he is saying something that sounds like the NDP could be saying it. He poses an existential crisis for the NDP. Now, this is the part I disagree with, because I don't actually think that he's saying things like saying anything more than what the NDP is already saying. So I disagree just on that phase, because I believe from when I first like briefly. So here's the thing: is when I first heard Pierre's acceptance speech, I was talking to Bud Rhino while Bud Rhino was streaming. Go check out Bud Rhino; he's cool. So I didn't catch everything that Pierre said. So we're gonna watch it right now. But my sense of it was that he just says things like inflation is bad, or housing is bad and we need to help housing, which are both things that you'll find left-wing people will agree with, and they're good things. We should care about these issues, right? Inflation is too high. It is hurting people. Housing prices are way too high. They are hurting people, etc. But like, Jagmeet Singh is already saying that stuff. So it's like, I don't know if he's like, you know, as if Pierre saying it is taking away from the NDP. But also it's like, I don't know. Like, I also don't know what will be the problem if he is saying it. Like, if he's going to siphon votes away. Like, I don't know how that necessarily works. And so then Pinko Punko here chimed in. Oh, hello, Grimpy. Pinko Punko chimed in with con rhetoric is 100% taking left points and funneling the solutions into lowering taxes and generic hard work freedom. Him not really saying anything is just conservatism. It's the coat he wears to do it. He's got the NDP's coat. Their solution will be to hand him their pants. I guess my arguments here in response to this stuff is like, one, I don't think these are leftist talking points. And two, I don't think that Pierre saying things the way he's saying them is necessarily going to pull people from the left to vote conservative. I don't think that's going to happen. That's my main contention. I guess we'll listen to the speech. My final thought, though, just to like fill in the last piece that I said there, is that I think the left has this like I don't know what it is, but this like lingering sense about what happened during the 2016 American election, which was that you had Trump saying things that I guess you could like ostensibly call left wing, But really, like, what Trump was saying, it was in the same sense of, like, maybe Pierre here, where it's like, you're saying something that sounds left-wing, but, like, really isn't. And so they go, well, Trump used this rhetoric, and he ended up winning. So we should be concerned that, like, it's going to happen again. Or you get, even if you want to go back in history, you get the same line with the Nazi Party, right? Where when the Nazis first formed, they adopted a lot of, like, socialist-ish language, hence why, you know, National Socialist Party, right? And so the fear is that somehow this is, like, the fascist move that's gonna, like, co-opt everything. So the issue I have with that argument is, like, I don't feel like we're at the full Nazi stage yet. As per Trump, like, I really don't think his, like, left-wing language really actually helped him, in the sense that he, when you look at, like, the Bernie supporters that were apparently the people he was trying to get with that language, according to this argument, most of them voted for Hillary Clinton. So that can't really explain it. And also, he lost the popular vote, for one, and then he won in, like, key states that Hillary Clinton decided not to visit, and therefore the turnout for Hillary Clinton was super low. So it's like, it didn't have anything to do with the language. It had more to do with, like, Hillary Clinton being a bad candidate, and also there was the Comey letter thing, which wasn't necessarily Hillary Clinton's fault, but also hurt her in those specific ridings. So I'm not worried about Pierre adopting this quote-unquote language, but I guess we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Look at him. Look at this Millhouse-looking guy right here. Merci beaucoup.
Merci Anaïda. Je t'aime.
Je ne comprends pas le français.
Of everyone here, expressing my sorrow at the passing of our beloved queen.
Oh yeah, shit. Oh god, I gotta cover this. So apparently, the Conservative Party spent $8,000 on, like, a confetti drop that was supposed to happen while he walked out. Like, Pierre's the winner, confetti drop. But, like, after the Queen died, they decided to cancel the contract for the confetti, which is why there was no confetti. In honor, like, they didn't want to, like, be offensive to the Queen by having a confetti drop for announcing the winner.
Two tiny words, the Queen. Yet
Not
on
the
every
Queen.
continent, those two words conjure up more than a picture. They also express an idea. The idea
monarchy.
of decency
Oh.
and duty. Elizabeth
Feudalism?
II, though she might have recoiled at the thought, was the world's most famous woman. Yet she was our queen, our sovereign, for almost half of our nation's existence. In her 22 visits here, yes indeed, and her 22 visits here and her dealings with 13 prime ministers, she exhibited the virtues we most cherish: dignity, civility, humility, candor, and above all else, service.
I should say, already just really appealing to the left-wing voters. She's 96 years old. Well, not anymore, but she was 96 years old. Only visited Canada 22 times, and she's, like, our figurehead. You'd think she could show a little bit more respect than that. 22 times? Yeah, I'm just gonna say it. What an asshole.
That's why her death, though not unexpected, is nonetheless
Should have came every year. That's what I'm saying, Grimpy. Show some fucking respect.
We felt that her strengths were ours. The strengths of a country which, by good fortune and God's grace, we call home. When I utter the words that no leader has stated in this country for over 7 decades, God save the King.
Oh, so brave. So brave.
Tonight begins the journey to replace an old government that costs you more and delivers you less with a new government that puts you first, your paycheck, your retirement, your home, your country. By tackling liberal inflation, we'll put you back in control of your life and your money. Le travail.
It's very left wing.
Le travail commence ce soir, and it is about you. This is not my victory, it is yours, and I have so many people to thank. Merci.
So we'll get to the thanks in a second. He is a think tank greaseball. I keep pointing this out, and it's kind of like surprising to me that a lot of people don't know this. But I should pull up, I guess, in case people like. The worrying thing about the left-wing language that I think some people have is that Pierre does support the convoy base and the kind of like rise of fascism that at least grew out of the anti-vaccine, anti-mandate movement. And so he's riding in on that wave. But you get people like Justin Ling here who said something stupid, so we'll just highlight that for a second. Justin Ling came out here with just a supreme tweet saying, Pierre Poilievre is not a white supremacist. He's not an anti-vaxxer. He's not an extremist. But up to a point, he's willing to use them to win in a brutal election. I think he genuinely believes that giving them an outlet is a constructive thing, which is a debatable point. This is bullshit, for one, because Pierre worked on the campaign for Ezra Levant, who's the asshole that I cover on my podcast. Ezra Levant being the main guy for Rebel News. Pierre and him were buddies back in the day. So, and if you want any like distillation of white supremacy, Ezra Levant pretty much fits that bill. But there's like this pretend idea like somehow Pierre here he's just some like normal conservative. And I don't buy that line either. He's not a normal conservative. The dude is fascist through and through, in my humble opinion.
To Scott Aitchison for running on ideas like simplifying.
So he's now thanking like the other people. So Scott was one of the other people who was running.
Thank you to Roman Baber for standing up for and making sacrifices for freedom for everybody.
Roman Baber was someone who used to be a part of the Ontario Conservative Party, but left because he was too anti-vaccine.
Thank you to his wonderful partner, Nancy, for championing children with autism. Thank you. Thank you to Leslyn Lewis for standing for
Leslyn Lewis is probably more fascist than he is. Faith, family, and freedom?
And to her husband John for supporting her along the way. Yeah.
Gotta thank her husband because
and thank you to
that's
Jean
the way God would have
for your
wanted it.
service to our country.
I do have to note the clapping for Jean Charest. So Jean Charest was the like more liberal conservative that was running. The clapping seems a lot more tame for him, I feel.
That we still have a country that is united in which we can call ourselves home. Thank you for fighting for Canada, Jean, when the nation's back was against the wall in the 1995 referendum. You stood with courage and passion. You defended our country, and our nation will ever be grateful for your work. Thank you.
So what Pierre's referring there to any non-Canadians listening was there was a referendum in the 90s where Quebec was going to separate, and Jean Charest was on the side of keeping Canada together. So that's Jean Charest was the one who stood up there briefly and sat back down. And he was running against Pierre. But he was the premier in Quebec as a part of the Liberal Party. So just to give you a sense of where Jean Charest's politics are.
And that's why I recognize Michelle. For those 4 decades,
Jeb
there have
Charest.
been countless occasions when her husband was fighting causes on behalf of all of us, when you had to carry the extra load and take the extra sacrifice, countless invisible sacrifices. And we as a nation, we as a party, we thank you, Michelle. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Look at the age in that room. That is a well-aged room.
Arms to you. Now, today, we are one party serving one country.
The camera focused in on the 2 most youthful-looking people in the room.
Most importantly, Thank you to my brilliant and beautiful wife.
Michelle, I think, was Sheree's wife.
Pour avoir été mon ancre,
Whoa.
pilier, tout au long de cette folle aventure. Tu as rendu cela possible. Tu es ma meilleure amie.
Yeah, I'm gonna have nothing to say about the French bits because I don't know what the fuck he said. I wish I was bilingual. Oh, family. Kids.
Vous avez rendu cela possible. Muchas gracias a la familia.
Oh, that's Spanish.
Y por su contribución a Canadá.
He spoke some Spanish. Look at that. Yeah, Pierre's wife is Spanish.
If you ever come over to our house for one of our grand family gatherings, it's usually 20 Latinos and Latinas arguing, telling jokes, telling stories in Spanish, and one guy standing around having no idea what anyone else is saying.
Everyone in the room got nervous when he started speaking Spanish.
My wife's family not only raised this incredible woman, but they came to this country from Venezuela with almost nothing.
That's
and
right.
They have since started businesses, raised kids, served in the military, and like so many immigrant families, built our country.
So I want to pause here just because, like, obviously he mentioned his wife's from Venezuela. I periodically, because I was watching Bud Rhino watch this live, but then periodically I was flipping over to see what Rebel News was covering. And so Ezra Levant, again, Pierre ran as a spokesperson for his campaign back in the early 2000s. Ezra was in the room. He was at this event, and after this speech was done, he really honed in on the fact that Pierre's wife was from Venezuela and was just like, she knows the failures of communism. And that's why Pierre will be so good, because his wife knows, like, personally how communism has failed.
Today, people feel like they've lost control of their pocketbooks and their lives. The cost of government is driving up the cost of living. This government, this liberal government, has doubled our national debt, adding more
Doesn't matter.
Than all
debt is great.
Governments combined.
Hooray for debt.
That means another
this is
$500
utterly
billion
meaningless.
bidding up the cost of the goods we buy.
This is also right-wing
and
talking
the
points.
We pay. Inflationary taxes increase those costs further. Now, they plan to triple the carbon tax on gas, heat, and everything else.
So again, like these aren't left-wing talking points, but I should chime in that, like, debt, I don't know why this still remains a talking point. And I think, I think I know why. It's like partly because people like conceptualize debt as like your household debt, like credit card debt. But a country having debt does not directly affect effective inflation. In fact, like having surplus or having like more money than you can spend out can actually increase inflation. So like the country being in debt doesn't like harm or cause inflation the way that he's saying it is. Plus, it's like the reason why you put a tax on gas and stuff like this is because you want to reduce people's usage of gas and stuff like this. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a good policy, but like the intent is to harm people, right? Because you're trying to dissuade people from using a type of thing.
It is the most expensive government in history, and the more they spend, the more things cost.
Like, this is not left-wing talking points.
Downgrade their diets to cover
spending is good.
Year-over-year jump in food prices. Seniors delay their retirements and watch their life savings evaporate with inflation. 30-year-olds who did everything we asked them to do, got degrees, worked hard, are trapped in 400-square-foot apartments, or worse, their parents' basements, because house prices have doubled under this government.
Yeah, so what are you going to do about it? See, I feel like that the housing part, at least, is the one thing where it's like, okay, now you're hitting on a left-wing thing. Yes, housing prices are too high. But then, okay, so what are you going to do about it?
Who own homes are paying more interest on their mortgages, even though this government promised interest rates would not rise for years. No wonder people are worried. Most are lucky to be just getting by. Many are falling behind. And there are people in this country who...
Well, on that note, Nom, I almost felt like what he was going to do was like, and then people are getting like degrees in basket weaving or whatever the like right-wing talking point was. But like, yes, what you're hitting on is exactly right. If you want to solve this issue, one way to do it is absolve the debt. Absolve people's personal debt that they inherited through going to school. Then they would actually have money on hand and could afford more things like a home.
We're just hanging on by a thread.
Because like I don't think that these are left-wing talking points by just appealing to like a fact.
They don't need
right?
a government that sneers at them, looks down on them, calls them names. They don't need a government to run their lives. They need a government that can run a passport office. They need a prime minister who hears them and offers them hope that they can, again, afford to buy a home, a car, pay their bills, afford food, have a secure retirement, and God forbid, even achieve their dreams if they work hard. They need a prime minister who will restore that hope, and I will be that prime minister.
Yeah, how? What a smile. Jesus Christ. Like, I feel like people who say, like, he's co-opting left-wing language is like, yeah, everyone says that. Singh says that. Who doesn't say, like, affordability, we need to afford things? Like,
inflationary deficits and taxes. That includes axing new taxes on your paycheck, gas, heat, and other essentials.
So that we die in climate change. Like, yeah, I get it.
It means fighting climate change with technology and not with taxes.
But how do you do that? Right? I mean, what are the reason why you can't just have, like, there's no, like, the new technologist, like, it appears out of nowhere? It's because you need to invest in it. And the problem is you have big oil companies that prevent these things from becoming feasible. So it's like, you know, they want to be like, just let the free market solve this. Okay, well, has the free market solved it yet? Like, you can't just, like, rely, like, hope that somehow this technology is magically going to appear. Just let the free market do it. It'll figure it out. Meanwhile, it's like you need infrastructure. You need a grid so that, like, these new renewable energy sources can actually feed into the power grid. You need government infrastructure to do that shit.
Store hope that hard work will again pay off. Do you know that today, if a single mom with 3 kids earning $55,000 a year goes out and earn another dollar, she loses 80 cents of it to taxes and clawbacks, so she can't get ahead. I will reform programs and cut taxes so that when that single mother and people like her earn more, they keep more, and hard work always pays off in this country.
But I don't know if he's energizing a kind of base, but I don't know if that politics works in Canada. Because since we have 3 parties, it's not the same as like the Democrat-Republican split, you know what I mean? So he's just as likely to send people to the Liberals than to have, like, I don't know, lefty or liberal types to go to conservatives.
And $10, well, it's $1 a loaf. If you double the number,
he's definitely trying to do that.
20,
yeah.
But you still have 10 loaves of bread, well, then it's $2. You see, spending more doesn't get us more. We need to make more. So instead of doubling the money, let's double the bread. Yes.
What?
Let's remove the government gatekeepers to build more homes, grow more food, and produce more energy right here in Canada.
Government gatekeepers? Like, let's deregulate everything. How is this a left-wing talking point? We need to double the bread. We need a baker on every corner of every street to the point where there's more bread than people need. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. Just deregulate everything, and then there'll be like 20,000 bakers, and everyone will have 80,000 loaves. This is conservative math.
We need to restore the hope of home ownership. Right now, youth and newcomers can't get a home because local government gatekeepers block housing with heavy fees and long delays for building permits, leaving us with the fewest houses per capita of any country in the G7.
And yet we have homes sitting vacant.
Land to build on. A Poilievre government will require big cities that want federal infrastructure money to speed up and lower the cost of permits and to approve affordable housing around all transit stations so that our young people can live there and don't even need to afford a car.
I should say with the housing thing, and like, yes, you were talking about this development core, which is like their idea, and it partly makes sense in their mindset of like supply and demand. So like the argument is sort of like, if you just build more homes, that'll create more homes than there are for demand because there'll be more available, and so like the supply and demand curve, prices will go down as like demand starts to go down as there's now a higher supply of homes, right? But the thing is, we have tons of homes now. The problem is not that, you know, that there is a lack of supply. The problem is that like we consider housing a speculative asset. So people are sitting on vacant homes to increase market values of their other properties within, say, Toronto. And so like these things are happening all over the place. Why not just take the housing we already have and find a way to like better incentivize people using it by either putting caps on rent or, you know, finding a way to actually regulate the market so that you don't have these like speculative like assets that people want to hang on forever and increase their value so that they have like their nest egg that way, when you could find other ways to like make people's retirements better or like make sure that they feel like safe and secure in the future, right? But instead they're relying on the fact that housing prices are going up for their retirements. Like my parents are sitting on their home too. They could downsize into a smaller place, but housing prices keeps going up. So then they're like, well, you know, we could get more later, and they want to retire at some point, so they sit on these things. It's just like I don't see how like you just build. Well, for one, building a whole bunch of homes is just going to devastate the land that's already being diminished in this country, right? You're going to destroy natural habitats, etc. So it's like, is that really the solution we want? I mean, of course, to them, they don't care about greenlands. They don't care about wetlands. They just think money. Build more houses. That'll solve the problem. Let's throw all of our money at construction companies. That's the solution. Also, huge real estate investors and smaller ones like cough cough Pierre cough cough scoop up new developments as well as older housing to take over the suburbs and turn them into rentals. I mean, that's it. That's the thing, is like that he wants to talk about like the problem is that there's too much red tape in building new homes, when the problem is there's not enough red tape when it comes to renting and mortgaging and housing prices.
We'll sell off 15% of the underutilized 37,000 federal buildings to turn them into housing and use the proceeds of sale to reduce our deficit. In other words, stop printing money, start building homes for our people.
Stop printing money.
We must make stuff here at home again, here in Canada. Look, trade is great.
Okay, what are you going to do about it?
Trade is just great. But we learned during COVID that we can't count on the rest of the world to take care of us. That is why we must be the best place on earth for workers and businesses to build factories, mine critical minerals for electric cars, and develop other resources. Right now, we lose wages because we import 130,000 barrels of overseas oil, mostly from dictators, every single day, even though we have the third largest supply right here in Canada. And that is all because our government prefers...
This is the ethical oil bullshit. This is Ezra Levant talking points here. Who wrote the book, Ethical Oil, so there you go.
This government's
and remember, he worked on Ezra's campaign.
With a law that protects our environment, consults First Nations, and gets things built.
Notice as well, he didn't mention how this is going to happen. So, like, how are you going to incentivize the companies to come here and build manufacturing goods here? Now, I could see if, like, you create, like, government owned manufacturing companies or something, but, like, the reason why companies are moving far away is because of the trade policies that make it easier for them to move, but then also the fact of, like, cheap labor happening elsewhere. And so there's other things having to do with capitalism that incentivize people from, like, leaving. So how are you going to make them stay? Like, that's the thing that's annoying. Is, like, that might be, like, vaguely a leftist talking point. I still feel like it's sometimes an icky talking point, because it's often a way of being like, you know, these other countries are bad, we need to buy locally, and it becomes, like, isolationist, you know? But he did sum up a point here that is relevant, which is COVID taught us that, like, emergencies can occur, that having a local production source can be helpful in times of crisis. So it's like, yes, we shouldn't just completely eliminate our manufacturing base for that reason, aside from the more xenophobic reasons that are often offered. You know, like, because even unions, like, engage in that kind of xenophobic rhetoric, which is really disgusting in my opinion. But, like, yes, okay, we need some more manufacturing at home. But, like, that's not going to come by the sort of free market policies that he adopts. That's the reason why these things left in the first place, you know? There could be ways that you can get the corporations, the big manufacturing corporations, to come back, but it'll involve you deregulating industry in certain ways to cut costs for or tax relieve taxation to corporations to incentivize them to come back. But we know that, like, harms the places where these businesses come back to, you know? If you completely deregulate things to make it, like, more friendly to corporations, that'll, like, screw yourself locally in terms of, like, for one, like, harming your workers, harming the environment, all the other things that come with deregulation.
Newfoundland and Labrador's planned increase in oil production, which will allow us to fully replace every single barrel of oil we're importing from abroad. And within 5 years, we will set the goal to end dictator oil in Canada altogether.
Gotta end that dictator oil. Gotta have that ethical oil.
Et au lieu d'aider Poutine à vendre son gaz naturel à
Did he just say
l'Europe
Poutine?
pour financer sa guerre, technology to be unleashed here instead of our money to go to foreign dictatorships. And that also includes repatriating food production by standing with our farmers here at home.
How are we not standing with our farmers already?
This government's high energy taxes and proposed fertilizer cuts
Poutine!
will only drive food production abroad to more polluting foreign jurisdictions, which would have to then burn fuel to ship, train, and truck that food back to us. But didn't we learn how irresponsible it was to rely on the rest of the world to provide us with our essentials during COVID?
There's like a really good book. I haven't, like, checked up on it to make sure that it all, like, fully works out. But part of the issue is, like, farming food is interesting in terms of, like, the efficiency of various soils and locations, right? So I think, like, one of the talking points that he raised here, but is also raised by a lot of the sort of, like, grow local, like, more lefty types, is this idea of, like, well, if we just all grow it here, it'll have less of a carbon footprint. But, like, if you want to grow certain crops here, it could actually have more impacts on the environment, given, like, what it does to the soil and how that releases carbon into the atmosphere, than actually, like, growing it in more efficient soils elsewhere and then, like, shipping them in from there can actually have a lower carbon footprint, which seems weird and counterintuitive, but that's just, like, how these things work. So it's like, you know, this might be a tricky thing to convince even leftists on, but it's like sometimes getting your produce from somewhere non-locally might actually be more environmentally friendly, as weird as that sounds. So I just want to point that out. a little weird that he's buying the sort of like, in ways, he's buying a more left-wing argument here for that specifically. Or I guess more typically a left-wing argument, because I would argue it's neither left or right. It's just a matter of the science of food transportation and science of the carbon impact of crop production. And you think of it in terms of like, because like less efficient soils, you have to use more nitrogen, fertilizer, etc. Right? So like it can have a more intensive environmental impact than if you grow it in more efficient soils, and then you're just spending the carbon in terms of shipping, right?
Of government will repeal these taxes and fertilizer mandates to get out of the way and off the backs of our farmers so that we can grow affordable food, feed our people, and be the breadbasket of the world.
I mean, we already treat our immigrant labor like really terrible, so I would not want to deregulate that anymore.
And decision making, and those communities that want to develop resources and invite commerce to fight poverty will have an ally rather than an obstacle in me.
Jesus Christ.
We must remove other unneeded barriers by axing
poverty?
the disastrous ArriveCan app.
Oh, that's how you get it. That's how we defeat poverty, getting rid of the ArriveCan app. That is the most serious threat to Canada right now.
And by ending the remaining COVID vaccine mandates to let people work and travel freely.
That's what's holding us back. COVID mandates. He's so left-wing.
Thank you.
The app is tyranny.
We will bring hope.
For non-Canadians, we have the Liberal government instituted an app for air travel. And so it's supposed to, provide your COVID information and vaccines up to date. And like, it's supposed to make traveling like work easier. But like, it has slowed certain processes down. It leaves open for like the information being susceptible to, hacks and whatnot. And so a lot of people have raised some like, about it. But at the end of the day, who cares about the app? Seriously? Like that's the issue. This is the thing that like, he needs to appeal to that conservative base that can fly, that has the money to fly on airplanes. It's like, I have to use a stupid app. Like that's who he's appealing to here. Great. This is really going to connect with people.
We will bring hope to doctors, nurses, engineers, and others who are immigrants to this country but are blocked from working in their professions for no other reason than that they come from another country. We'll team up with provinces.
That's actually a good thing.
That within 60 days,
hey, credit where credit is due. Yes, it is super weird. I was talking to my cousin who went abroad to Australia. She is now an OBGYN, but in Australia, and she could come back to Canada, but she would not be able to practice here in Canada because even though she got her degree in Australia, it doesn't translate over to here, which is just absurd when you think about it. I don't think Australia is teaching like such radically different ways of dealing with pregnancy or the female reproductive system such that like moving here is going to make a difference. I don't know. So silly. So yes, I think that is an issue and one that should be addressed. Again, I don't know how he's going to fix it, but it probably should be addressed. Australia is weird though. Well, Australia is weird, but like I don't think the weirdness corresponds to their like ability to teach medicine to people.
Immigrant applying to work in their profession will get a yes or no based on their tested abilities, not based on where they come from.
Yeah.
We will back up 30,000 small study loans for those in need of time off work to study up to the Canadian standard. Enough talking, remove the gatekeepers to get more doctors, more nurses, more engineers, and more inflation-proof paychecks for our brilliant immigrants.
Inflation-proof?
And we will restore the hope of safe streets, a hope that has turned into fear in all too many places after killings in Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto, and most recently, Saskatchewan. Weakened laws allow chronic and violent reoffenders out of prison early at great danger to our people. Instead of spending a fortune targeting licensed and law-abiding, trained and tested firearms owners, Conservatives will bolster the laws, bolster the borders, and put the real criminals in jail.
Like, again, how is that a left-wing? So far, I've gotten like maybe 2 or 3. Like the doctors thing, I don't even think is a left-wing idea. That's just a sensible thing that anyone should be in favor of. It's neither left or right-wing. The few left-wing things have just been like housing, but then his solution is right-wing. And then the manufacturing thing, but he barely touched on it. And then inflation, which he's barely touched on how he's going to fix that. Other than deregulating and removing taxes, which again are right-wing solutions. And here he is saying that like what we need to do to curb crime is to like make gun ownership easier. I don't understand. And like I don't know why. So he's riffing on what happened recently in Saskatchewan. And I don't know that much of the background, but there was a person who was released from prison, at least at some point, after he had already stabbed somebody, and then went on to commit this murder spree where he killed 10 maybe 11 people. And I guess the suggestion there is that somehow, if he stayed in prison, this wouldn't have happened. But it's like, what do you do? Do you make it so like you have this one like arguably a freak occurrence where it's like, if somebody stabs someone, should they go to jail for the rest of their lives? Should that be like what our criminal system does? One mistake and you're gone for the rest of your life, so even if you didn't like kill the person and they might be all right, you know. It's just you did a stab, so I don't know necessarily that that's the better solution. So I mean, I'd like to know more about this case and to what extent it has caused harm, or like it could have been like fixed within the system, but like just because you have the one coincidence where this person was in jail here and then ended up committing a similar crime when he got out is the reason why people have latched onto it. But it's like, you don't have the hindsight to know that. You're saying it is an outlier. Exactly. Which is like, that's like the thing. It's like, you'll never have that hindsight. So they get to always play this like, you know, whoever let them out, they weren't tough on crime and they get to like puff out their chest. But it's like, you can't predict it. Like the only way to solve that problem is to make people stay in jail longer. And is that really the solution? How is that going to help anyone? That and like again, what Core said is this dude supported Coots, he supported Ottawa, he supported people breaking the law and doing a lot of violence. So.
Mon gouvernement ne va pas se mettre le nez dans tout. Un État fédéral plus petit va faire grandir des citoyens du Québec et du Canada. Small government makes for
I gotta say, I love this, like, his transition out of, like, French is to just, like, say an English word. Like, he's done this throughout the whole speech.
Canada, small government.
Small government. Where the fuck did that come from?
Makes for big citizens who own their homes, build their dreams, raise their families, look out for their neighbors, and earn powerful paychecks and savings free from inflation and overtaxation. We will restore Canada's promise in a country where it doesn't matter who you love, or if your name is Smith or Singh, Martin or Mohammed, Chang or Charles. A country where the dreamer, the farmer, the worker, the entrepreneur, the survivor, the fighter, the ones who get knocked down but keep getting back up and keep going can achieve their purpose. A country where the son of a teenage mother adopted by 2 teachers can dare to run for Prime Minister of Canada.
He didn't say anything there. It's just like hope. But like, that isn't anything. And like, I've heard NDP speeches where they actually suggest things to be done. This is why, like, there's sort of like a silly aspect to say that any of this was left wing. Even now that I've listened to it, I feel like even more confirmed in my position that, like, because what did he hit on here that was like ostensibly left wing? It was inflation, housing, and manufacturing. And all of the solutions to these problems were right-wing solutions. It was like, we need to deregulate and like lower taxes. So that it's like, what, like, how at all can this speech be characterized as him appealing to the left in any capacity? I do not hear it. And so I don't like, I don't know. I don't know if this language is sufficient in the same way that, like, even when Trump was saying things that were more like, quote unquote, working class or left wing, he wasn't just saying the word working class. Like, Trump was actually saying things that were in direct opposition to the sort of like policies of his party in terms of like their corporations, you know? But I don't know. I don't buy this line that it's like feeding into some sort of like left wing thing, because he's gonna get called out on this immediately. How, like, and here's the thing is, how is this going to work when inflation starts to come down once the supply chains start to sort themselves out? Because most of the issues with inflation right now have to do with supply chains that were disrupted during the pandemic. And then everything else was just like, you know, red meat for the conservatives. It's like, there's a reason why he won the conservative leadership race, you know. I do appreciate that, like, countrywide polling shows that he is very unfavorable in terms of the wider public. So he might have won, like, a robust conservative party victory. But whether that'll translate to popular support is also... you know, we will have to wait and see, I guess. and like, as I was saying to Bud too, because like, you know, I think a lot of people are like, you know, worried that he's gonna like gain some sort of momentum, or there's gonna be some sort of like liberal scandal or whatever. And the thing is, it's like he's now gonna be in the spotlight for possibly 3 years before there's another campaign. Possibly. That all depends on how much the NDP liberal working relationship survives. And like, I don't know. That's 3 years of like skeletons being looked into, you know? I'm sure this dude has skeletons in his closet. That would not surprise me the least, you know? So we'll have to see. I don't know. I don't have the same fears that it seems other people do, that he's somehow going to pull off this like economic populist sort of like thing and cause people to either not support the NDP or leave the NDP for the Conservatives. I do not see that happening. And that's aside from whether I think the NDP sucks or not. Because like, can the NDP be better? Of course, you know. I complain all the time about the NDP. I'm just talking specifically about whether or not this is an effective strategy of somehow taking people who could vote NDP and making the vote conservative. I don't know if it's going to be enough. I don't find it particularly convincing on that front. I don't think it is going to be that successful. Especially when it's surrounded by all the other right-wing bullshit. Because even if you just keep it in isolation and go, okay, he talked about inflation, he talked about manufacturing and working class, and he talked about housing. Like, even those like things alone didn't have enough there to, I feel like, jostle people into going, I'm going to vote for him. But we'll see.